Hi, Cutie Pies. It's Lanickia, and I am coming to you with a new show that I've been watching. It's just in its second episode. It's called Lovecraft Country. It is on HBO. This is how much I wanted to see this show. I actually have Stars, and I paid for HBO through Stars because I knew I wanted to really see this show. So I watched the first episode. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. I didn't do a review over it. I don't really like. I like to get gain a little information about the characters and everything before I start doing reviews. So for the first episode, I didn't do a review, but I am going to do a review over the second episode and going forward. I'm going to try to get better at keeping up with that. But it might take me a day or so to actually put out the review, just because there's a few shows that come on Sundays, and this is one of them that comes on Sundays. But I'm going to at least try to have it out by Monday. So it's Lovecraft Country. This is season 1, episode 2, called Whitey's on the Moon. Okay, so the show starts off, and we see them just like we see George and Letty just enjoying everything about living in this luxurious mansion and everything, well, lodge or whatever you want to call it. They're enjoying everything about it. They're enjoying they have their George has his favorite books. Letty has her favorite clothing. Like everything that they could possibly ever have wanted or desired, they have. But then we see that Tick is the only one that's like remembering what happened the night before, as far as everything with the monsters. He's the only one that's like that is serious, has a serious face on. So then we see there's a loud whistle sound. No, there's a bell that rings, and so they come out of their hotel, and Tick says, George and Tick are the first ones out, and George says he could stay in his room all day just reading. And Tick is like, I think that's the point. What if that's the point? And then we see where Letty comes out, and Letty says that she's wearing a fancy getup, and they're like, where'd you get those? And she was like, everything in the room. And Tick was like, it all fit. She was like a glove, everything fit. Everything was her size. So then we see where William, we find out that the man who answers the door, he's not, I thought he was the butler, but he's not. His name is William. And he escorts them to dinner, and then he kind of gives them a brief history about the house. So we find out that this is actually a replica of the original house, which was built by Titus. What happened was Titus was building this house, but there was a fire. And when the fire came, everything was destroyed. But Samuel, a distant cousin of Titus, has rebuilt everything and to look exactly like it was when Titus was running it. And we found out he was in shipping and everything, and they say he was kind to his slaves and all of that. But anyways, in the house we find out there was only one person that everything and everyone was destroyed except one person, they say. So they go out to eat and everything, and that's when we find out that William is not a butler. He's actually just a friend of, I believe her name was Crystal or Christine. Oh, sorry about that. But anyways, the woman in the red hat that we saw in episode 1, when the guys were chasing Tick and Letty and George, trying to shoot them in the town Summersville, we find out that woman has went with George. Has went with Tick's dad to a lawyer in Boston, and they're not believing it. George and Tick are like, I don't believe this. He's not in Boston. So they go out to this veranda, and they're eating breakfast and everything. And William leaves, but he tells them if they go anywhere, just be back before dark, because they have a celebration set up and everything for them. So they say, okay. And then that's when they find out, like, Letty is like ringing the bell, because William had told them, ring the bell if you need anything. And she was like, I need salt. She needs seasoning. And so they're like, Tick tells her, how can you eat like that after what happened last night? And she said, and she realized she doesn't remember what happened last night. And George doesn't remember either. The only person that remembers is Tick. And so then Tick starts telling them what happened, and they can't believe it. They're like, what? And they were like, why don't we remember any of this? And then Tick starts getting really agitated, and George tells him, stop. We're being watched. Sit down. And so Tick says, well, we need to split up. You and Letty go in there. And Letty says, no, we need to stay together. And George agrees with her. No, we need to stay together because something weird is going on. We need to find your dad and then get out of here because there's some weirdness going on around here. So they say, okay. I have went all ahead of my nose, y'all. Give me give me one moment. Let me try to catch this up. Okay, George. Agree. Oh, okay. Okay, so Liddy, Uncle George says, okay, so they're being watched. So, okay, so then they say, let's go get the car. Let's go find the car. And Tick tells them their car was in a wreck because of the monsters and everything. Letty had wrecked it. But when they get to the car, it's perfect. It's immaculate. Nothing's wrong with it. And William is there, and he hands George the keys, and he tells them the only thing that was wrong with the car was there was a lot of blood, and he just assumed that they had trouble on the road or whatever. And so they're like, so they decide to, go walking. And as they're walking, Letty is telling George, because they don't believe him about the monsters. They don't believe this. They don't remember it. So to them, he just sounds crazy. Excuse me. He just sounds crazy. And so then what happens is Letty's like, he could have shell shock. And Tick is, he hears them and he's like, no, I know what happened last night. Y'all don't remember, but these things happen. I'm not crazy. And then they hear this high-pitched whistle, and he says that's the whistle that called the monsters off. And so then he goes running towards that whistle, and it's a woman. I think her name was Dell, with dogs, and the dogs are going crazy. And so Tick is like, where'd you get that whistle? Like, what is that whistle control? He's going at her, and George and Letty are trying to stop him. So they get her. George gets her to calm down by telling her we're guests of Samuel's and everything. And so she starts making these comments about black bears, and she's really referencing to black people, because this of course this whole thing is really about race and all of that kind of different stuff. This whole show is based on that, like the Jim Crow and all of that different kind of stuff. So let's move on. So she starts referencing like the black bear, and they're not smart enough to know when to leave well enough alone, and any of that. So anyways, they go ahead and leave. They leave her there, but they note to her that aren't you the sheriff, because this is a jail that you're behind. This is the only building that's bricked, and it's the tower. Like, if when you read books and everything back in that time and times past, you'll know that that's where they would keep prisoners and everything. And she would be like, no, it's just for slaughtering and all that kind of. Anyway, so they're walking off. Tick, Letty, and George leave, and George and they all say that that would be the perfect place to keep someone. And Letty was like, well, with the dogs barking, you wouldn't hear them scream, and and everything. And there's and George says there's a basement down there and everything. So they're pretty sure that that's where they're holding Tick's dad. Because everything that they're saying doesn't make sense. Like, because Tick was like, I would like to, know what hotel did they go to? What lawyer are they seeing? But the guy, William, couldn't answer any of those questions because he says he's not privy to that information. But anyway, so they know that he's not in Boston. His dad's not in Boston. They're holding him properly down there in that dungeon or in that basement jail tower. So they're walking through the woods, and I said, how did it get dark? Because she tells them, y'all better go on before it gets sundown, because through this whole thing, they repeatedly tell them, don't be in towns after sundown, because after sundown, especially if you're a person of color, bad things can happen to you. And that's even today, like you know what towns not to go into. So nothing's changed for some towns on that front. But anyways, so they walk through the woods, and it's gotten dark, and Letty and Tick say they need to steal a car, and Letty says, I'll be able to do that. And then Uncle George slows down, and he says, remember, he remembers a story that Tick's mom told him. And Tick is like, what do you mean? Because she never told me and Dad anything, but she told you? Okay, so then he said maybe she was ashamed. I think she was ashamed, but he tells the story of that her I think it was her great 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 grandmother was a slave here, and that she ran away. There was a fire, but she escaped. So that's the person who escaped from the fire with Titus. Was her ancestor, which was, I believe they called her Hannah. And she would anyway. She escaped the fire, and she was pregnant while she was running through those woods. So as they talk, the monsters come out, and they're like, "What is this?" And so Letty and George finally see the monsters that Tick was talking about. And then all of a sudden, Christina and Dale come, and Christina tells Dale, get George and Letty to their rooms and take Tick to see my father. I'm sorry, y'all. All the names. Take Tick to see my father. And so then she's like, okay. And so then, as soon as she does that, the George and Letty are like, why are we covered in dirt? And they're like, oh my God, it's happening again. So now they're starting to believe Tick, because they were like, why do I just not remember that piece of time right there? I should know what just happened. So now they definitely know something is wrong. So then we see Letty, and so then we see Tix goes to see Christina's father, and he is being operated on, and he's screaming out, and they're going inside of him and removing a piece of him. And then it cuts to George. He tries to remember like what's going on, because he's like, if Tick is family, like, if he's related, he's blood related, he's family, then this was never about his father. His father was just, Tick's dad was just the bait to get Tick here. And so he goes to a book, and he pulls on the book, and it opens up to another compartment of the house. And so he starts going through there. Okay, so then we cut to Tick and Christina have met Samuel, and he starts going on and on about Adam and Eve, and how he's Adam and he wants to take this place back to the Garden of Eden and all of that. But he needs Tick, because Tick has the bloodline for Titus, and I don't know. I've never read this book. I think after this it's all over with, I might go ahead, like after the first season is all over with, I might go ahead and read this book, because I feel like I would understand what's going on just a little bit more. Because I have to watch this show twice just to catch everything that they have going on. But anyways, so he needs Tick to help them achieve that. So then Christina takes Tick to his room and tells him he should like have them as friends. Like they're not the type of people, like her dad and the other men are not the type of people that they want, that he wants to make enemies with. He shouldn't just like have them as friends. And he's like, I got enough friends or whatever. And then so then I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes. Oh, so then he tells her, if we're friends, then what you should do is I know you cast a spell on Letty and George, remove the spell so that they can remember. And so she does remove the spell, but when she does that, she also locks Tick in his room, so he can't go to them. So now they're remembering, and and you can hear Letty screaming and everything because she's frightened. Thinking about everything that she's seen. Excuse me. Okay, so then Christina goes, and she goes, and this cow is giving birth. And I thought she was gonna have a calf, but she had one of those little monsters. So they actually control the monsters that's in the woods to keep them safe and protected. So yeah, they're able to control them with the whistle and everything. So then we see Letty trying to get out, and she comes across Tick, and so Letty and Tick start talking, and And, she tells them how her mother abandoned her, and Tick promises her he won't abandon her like that. And so they kiss and everything, and they're about to share an intimate moment. On the set, as this is happening, they go across the castle to Tick, and we see that Tick is fighting. He's fighting someone, and he called them by name. He's fighting someone, and he has a flashback of being in the war, and he's fighting them. And as that is happening, we see George. Tick's mom comes to George, because if you know, George had a picture of her in his wallet. So we find out that with this scene, we find out that they loved each other, or they had some kind of love interest with each other. And so she's there, and they're talking, and she's telling him this could be like this always. You could fly. And he kisses her. Kisses her on her forehead, and he says, "You're not real." And when he says that, he looks, and you see all three of them. You see Tick's scene where he's fighting and he kills the other soldier, the enemy for him. You see Letty, where she's trying to run away from Tick, because in her dreams he's a snake and he's trying to attack her. And then you see George, who knows this isn't real, and he's like trying to figure out a way to get out of it. So you see all that, and you see these men, all these white men in this room, and they're watching all of the scenes and laughing and talking. And then they're saying, like, what's Samuel's daughter doing here? Because Christina is there as well, and she wants to be a part of this lodge, this brotherhood. But because she's a female, because she's a woman, she can't be a part of it. Okay. So then we see a bell rings, and Letty, George, and Tick all go into the hallway. And William is there again, and he tells them they're about to have dinner, but unfortunately it's men only, so Letty can't come. As they're doing this, Tick tells his Uncle George and Letty that something happened in the war, and Uncle George tells them, "Stop. Don't make them feel bad for being who you are. You did what you had to do. These people that are watching us and doing this to us are just trying to get in our heads. They're just trying to make us feel less than, and they're trying to make us afraid and scared and everything. But we're not going to do this." And so they all agree that they're going to stand strong. So Tick and George get ready. And Letty goes back. I wanted to call her Letitia. Letty goes back to her room because she can't come. Okay, so then they go to dinner, and Tick and his uncle sit at the table by themselves, and all the other men are just staring at them because it's very racist, And so they're just staring at them and whatever. And William tells them, just because they don't want you here doesn't mean you don't have a right to be here. And so as Samuel comes out, and remember he was having this operation, so we find out that he gave them his rib, because he started talking about the rib and how Adam gave up his rib for Eve and all that. And so Tick tells his Uncle George, "Don't eat that." And so then we see where Samuel's just thanking them all for being there, and then Uncle George gets up and says, "Well, you don't have to thank us because we didn't want to come, because I didn't want to come. Y'all pretty much forced us to come to this." And so he says, "But I was reading your bylaws for I can't remember. I can't remember what it was called. But Tick is a son among sons, and because he is a son among sons, because he's the direct heir to Titus, blood related. He's because Titus is like his great grandfather or something like that. He's a direct heir. He's a son among sons. So even though he might be African American and everything, he still has power over them by their bylaws, by their bylaws and everything. So Tick gets up and he tells them, "So I want all of you to leave the room except for Samuel." So and they all sit there and they stare at him like, "What?" But then he says, that's an order, gentlemen. And because he is, a song among sons, a son among sons, they have to follow his orders. So they get up and leave. And so he tells Samuel, I order you to return my son. And Samuel like, listen, I know that traditionally he probably would have had to do it, but he don't believe in it. Like, he believes in the tradition enough for the men to follow whatever he says. After that, he's not gonna do it. Even though Tick is over him and he's supposed to do it, he's not gonna do it. So the next scene we see is that he tells Tick, if you want your father and everything, you're gonna have to help me. Like, I need, tainted or not, I need your bloodline, because you're part of the bloodline and I need your help. Okay, so then we see where Tick and George have went and they're trying to get Montrose. Is it Montrose? Yes, Tick's father. They're trying to get him, and they went back to that tower that they went to earlier where the woman had the dogs. Now she sees them and she's like, just what I thought. Just dumb animals. You don't know when to leave it alone. So she's about to shoot them and let the dogs eat them. But Letty comes down and she knocks her out. And so they look for him and they can't find him. And then they cut to another scene and we see that Tick's dad has actually dug his way out of it and he's lifting himself up out of the ground and everything. And we see, so he's escaped. And so they say, Montrose, is it Montrose? Montrose, they call his name and he's like, what are y'all doing here? And Tick says, you wrote to me. And he was like, yeah, we haven't spoken in 5 years. Like, he's pretty much like fussing at Tick because Tick came to rescue him. Anyways, so he's upset with them and George is trying to tell him, like, go easy on him. And he's like, don't tell me how to raise my son, speak to my son or and whatnot. So, anywho, what they pretty much come down to is Letty is like, we need to get out of here. Come on, let's go. I've already stole the car. Let's get out of here. So they get in the car that they stole because they couldn't take Woody because Woody, they don't know what's going on with Woody as far as why it was like that. So they're driving and they start telling, and George starts telling them that, like, this is not the only house that's doing this, but this house has the most power to do this and everything. And as far as trying to go back to the Garden of Eden. And so as they're driving, they're getting away. And all of a sudden they hit this wall, which is a spell. They've created another spell so that they can't escape. And, and they crash. And so they all start falling out of the vehicle. And when they do, Samuel shoots Letty. And when he shoots Letty, Tick is asking, Christina, please help, stop this, stop Samuel from doing this. And she won't because she can't go against her father. So then we see that Samuel tells Tick because you were disobedient or whatever, I'm going to shoot, like, tell me who you want to save. And Tick, he just kind of looked at his uncle. He wasn't trying to save him. You know how sometimes someone says something and you just look at the person. And so Samuel shoots his Uncle George and he's like, if you perform the ceremony, I'll save them or whatever. So the next scene we see them getting Tick ready to perform the ceremony, and Christina is there with them. And he just pretty much tells her, why are you doing this? It's not son among daughters, it's son among sons. So you'll never be what you want to be to your father, no matter what you do. And she pretty much just tells Tick, like, we're both in the same boat, like, because Tick he came out and helped his dad, and he was ungrateful for it. So they're both really in the same boat as far as not being able to help loving the people that don't really deserve their love and everything. And then you look and you can see like this mirror where you see Letty is healed, and she starts having a breakdown because she died and now she's alive again. And she said, Christina lets Tick know, the same way her father, brought Letty back or healed her or everything, he'll do that with Uncle George but Tick is like, yeah, but I had to perform the ceremony for him to do it. And she tells Tick that, like, it doesn't matter what our grandfathers, our fathers, it doesn't matter. We can decide what we want to be. It's just that you have to seize the moment you whenever you see it. Um so then they go to the actual ceremony, and all the men are there, and they put Tick in the center, and they have all this energy power, and Samuel starts chanting, and they're getting all of this I guess energy or power or whatever from Tick, and everything is starting to turn into the beautiful Garden of Eden. Now while this is going on, we find out from George and um, Montrose that Tig is actually possibly George's son, because George, I guess, had something happen with Tig's mom, and they just all agreed not to mention it, not to say anything about it, and but George is like, I can't, because he realizes that he's dying, because of course he's been shot. He realizes that he's dying, and he's like, I need you to show Tick love, and I know you have it in you. Before our dad like pretty much beat it out of him, he was like, I need you to show love, and I know I've hurt so many. He was like, I've hurt so many people. George says, including his wife, his brother, Tick, because he never spoke up, and so that's what we find out there. That they Tick is probably, there could be a great possibility that Tick belongs to is George's son. So anyways, we go back to the ceremony, and as everything is starting to turn into the Garden of Eden, and you see Tick's hands start to turn into flowers or a branch and all of that. All of a sudden, this woman appears, which we assume is Hannah, because she's very pregnant. She has on like servant clothing and everything, so we're assuming that's Hannah, his great 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 grandmother. And she's standing there, and that's when when Christina told him there is a time that you could, but you have to seize it. And so Tick follows Hannah. So he starts to follow Hannah and starts to go towards, I guess, her energy. And when he's doing that, it kind of messes up the spell. But, well, it doesn't kind of. It messes up the spell, and they should stop it. But Samuel wants this power so much that he doesn't. And so all the other men are try to run away, but they can't, because Tick screams. And when he does that, they turn to stone, like Lot's wife. They start turning to salt and stone and everything. So he starts following Hannah through the house, because she's running. Like, she turns and she runs, and he runs with her, and they start following her through the house and everything. And then she stops at the doorway. And did anybody see that book? What book did she have in her hand? Anyways, she stops at the doorway, and because the whole time she's just been looking at Tick, and then he runs through, and the house just crumbles. And while that's going on, Letty says, we got to get out of here. And Tick's dad is like, well, if we move him, George, then he's gonna bleed out. And she was like, well, we're gonna die here if we don't, if we don't go. So they do move him, and they're all trying to run out of the house. And so when Tick runs out of the house, Letty comes running up to him, because they're happy that they got out. But she's also, he could look at her face and see something's wrong. So he goes to the car, and Uncle George is dying. He did indeed bleed out. And I was shocked. I was like, wait a minute. I know Uncle George is not dead. Like, I thought he was like he was gonna be, Mr. Courtney was gonna be a part of this series. And I was reading, and apparently this doesn't happen in the book, because he has so much information. I'm like, who's gonna give him all this information? Because I enjoyed that part of the series, just him giving all of that information. Like on the first episode, when he was like, why did they paint the White House white? And he started telling, all of that Dracula and all. So I was disappointed, but yeah, he died. And so that's how it went off, and everything. The replica, everything is burned down. So I don't know what's going to happen with the monsters in the woods. Like, who's going to be able to control them? Because the other people, I wonder, did they leave too? Can someone tell me that? The other people, like, the townspeople and all that, because there was more to it than just them. Or was that all a spell? I don't know. This is one of those shows that you just don't know. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you next time, next week for season 1, episode 3. Bye.